live. Okay, should be live now. All right, so good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining again for the monthly query progress meeting. So high-level goal is still exactly the same as every other time. So in order to hide away the complexities for reading and writing for app developers, we look into efficient read-write abstractions. So the team is still the same. The format is also still the same, so 5 minutes per researcher. First, focus on high-level goals, then accomplishments of the last month, and then targets for next month. And the first person in the queue is Maarten. So I'll just rotate my screen and screen sharing stopped. So let me start again. This cable is a bit annoying.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So as always, my high-level goal is to optimize decentralized querying using aggregators for incremental processing. Aggregators are a component in the ecosystem that perform some transformation beforehand and make sure that they are being authorized by the original data owners, I guess. And yeah, I do this with incremental query. So the transformations are just queries, and I keep the queries incrementally or maintain the results incrementally. What I've worked on is actually mainly paper writing, so I don't have.
Just a moment.
Okay, it's mostly paper writing. So one is a watch party demo paper, which I previously submitted to the web conference, but it was rejected there. It has fine scores, was I think 212, so I was surprised that it was rejected. But in any case, I reworked the comments that I did have, which was mainly a performance benchmark, and I put that in there and I reworked it to the new format. And then also the aggregator specification paper, which is just a paper explaining the specification and design decisions that were made in there. And the only thing that's left to do there is use cases. So yeah, there are some use cases where we use the aggregator, and I want to explain. Yeah, I just explain about how the aggregators work in that use case, like doing pseudonymization and so on and so forth. Then my next targets are to finish that specification paper, and then secondly is to work on a query aggregator paper where we actually use a query engine inside the aggregator. Then most of it is already written. I just have to finish the benchmarking and then write the result in the discussion section. In like initial results from running the benchmark just locally on my machine, yeah, shows that the aggregator does perform better, which makes sense if you perform the query beforehand and then just get the results, it's faster. But yeah, it does prove that you can massively decrease latency in applications with the aggregator. Yeah, that's it for me.
Cool. Any questions for Maarten? So maybe I might have missed it. Maybe you said a bit the paper that was not accepted. Will you resubmit it somewhere?
Yeah, ESWC. So
ISWC, you mean?
ESWC is a demo paper. ESWC, the demo paper track is
demo, not the main track.
No.
Okay. But it was submitted as main track.
It was submitted as a demo track at the web conference.
Okay. Okay. I was confused.
No problem. But yeah, mostly paper reality, so not much.
Okay, good. Over to. Oh wait, I see a raised hand.
Yes, I have a question. You can hear me, right?
Wait, can you say that again, Brian?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was wondering because Maarten, you said that you added a benchmark to your paper, but the demo track of ESWC is like less than half of the length of the web conference. I was just curious, what did you cut to be able to put the whole benchmark inside of it?
So it's about the watch party, and the whole premise is that the aggregator improves latency and yeah, just latency. So I just quickly did some latency measurements inside the application, and then wrote like a one sentence statement like, oh, without the aggregator, it takes this much seconds, and with it takes this much milliseconds. So it's like two statements for the 2 pages, how fast they load. So it's like a benchmark, but yeah, it's a performance indicator is maybe a better word.
Okay, I understand. I was wondering if it was a real big benchmark, and I was
No.
impressed.
But thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, unless there are any other questions, we can move to
Yeah, so since last month, my high-level goal has not changed. I'm still working with genomic data and looking how we can store it in a sub-file level way that allows us to enforce privacy protections and query said data. What I worked on, so tons and tons of publication stuff. So I submitted a flash talk for the Solid Symposium for Solid Cockpit in Beatrice's privacy and data management session. So I will hear back about that soon, I think. And then I also submitted VCF semantic conversion implementation to swap for HCLS. I submitted a full paper, but it was accepted as a poster, so I just redid the paper to be a poster, which means I basically just cut out the entire paper and put a little summary for the poster. But
yeah,
then,
so in 2 pages.
yeah, it was 2 pages in CUER
Yeah.
format. So
including
it's like,
references.
including reference. So it's literally 3 paragraphs of about 4 sentences each. So yeah, hence why I changed the title. And I then transitioned a lot of the content of that publication to just being a conceptual, what would an implementation look like? And then I converted a lot of the work from the full paper into a submission for the European Conference of Computational Biology, and that is due in March. And so a lot of the work that I did initially for Swap for HCLS has been refined and extended to be the development of a tool called VCF RDFizer. The name is still in progress.
I actually like it.
It's not too bad. It's a little bit of a tongue
It will
twister.
never change.
Yeah.
It's a final version.
But it's a tool that allows for the end-to-end conversion of VCF data, which is a file input that can be quite large. Compressed, some of the files can be over 1 gigabyte in size, into RDF, represented comprehensively as N triples. That's not a trivial thing when you're dealing with over 1 gigabyte of compressed text file and trying to convert it into RDF. There's a lot of semantic inflation. So the tool it was harder than I thought it was going to be to complete it. But it comes with a vocabulary and yeah, so the paper is packaged and I'm currently writing the actual text. Soon to be finished, and it will be submitted to ECCB. Because it's not the perfect conference, I don't know if it will be accepted or not, but thought might as well try, and then if it gets rejected, take the feedback and maybe find another venue for it, because it is a lot of work and it is quite interesting. So, and there's a lot of not trivial problems within the tool that I had to solve itself. So yeah, that's on the horizon. And then I've been writing a small, or not small, but a demo paper for ESWC for Solid Cockpit. Similar to the flash talk at Solid Symposium, but the Solid Symposium will be published. So I thought a publication would be nice for the Solid Cockpit demo. So I've been writing that paper as well. Then my next targets, so finish up all of these publications. They'll all be done at the beginning of March. So I have about a week and a half of writing ahead of me. And then look at Then finishing up the real world federated query survey study. We're aiming for ISWC, so I then have about a month and a half to get that all tied up and then submitted. So that'll be the next sort of focus. And then after all of these publications, I will once again be able to focus on research. But yes, that is all for me.
Timeline-wise, when do you expect to start with the finishing of the last thing?
Once these papers are submitted, so early March.
Yeah, because in 2 weeks I'll be taking another week off. But this one probably requires some, thinking out the new story, because the story has changed quite a bit. So maybe somewhere this week or next week, maybe we can reserve some time already to think about.
Just end of next week.
Yeah.
Maybe on like Friday. Because last submission is on Thursday at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Can you send an invite?
Yes.
Cool. Any other questions?
Yes. Do you actually materialize the VCF RDF?
Yeah.
data?
So how it works right now is I use RML streamer and define the RML rule set to take in this essentially text file that I, in an intermediate step, converted to TSV. So then essentially the rules define what each column is for and materialize it into RDF, but RML streamer does it in batches. So it's intended for being able to stream the RDF conversion, but I use it because then you don't run into memory constraints because it doesn't load the whole TSV at the same time. I tried it with RML, the main Java RML tool. I forget what it's called right now. RML.
The Java.
Yeah, the regular RML Java converter. And that crashed because it runs into a memory Java heap limit errors. So what I do is I materialize it into these smaller streamed files, and then either 2 versions that I'm prototyping of the tool, where one of them compiles all of these into a large graph, a single and triples file, and then compresses that file by default so that you don't have this giant 25 gigabyte file on your computer. But with tools like HTT, then you run into memory errors of compressing the whole 25 gigabyte file into HTT. So I'm also looking at, so that's an option if you have a lot of memory on your machine. But then the other option is to stream and leave it in the chunked files and then compress each of the chunked files individually. And then in future work, we're looking at maybe being able to combine the HTT indexes of all of the chunked files into a cumulative file for query.
Do you think it's possible to do it on the fly? So not materialize the whole thing, but just like, on the fly, if a query is executed, only RDFize that's part of it that you actually need and only run the query on that part instead of the whole file just on the...
Yes, but what I'm leaning into for my storyline is being able to link data to specific parts of the VCF file, which you could do in a sort of virtualized manner, but it would require a lot of computation in the actual like designation of where the linkage should be once it's virtualized.
If you can make it deterministic, I guess it doesn't really matter because if you do it deterministically, you know that that link will always be there, I guess.
Yeah.
But makes it much more difficult, of course.
Well, originally it was part of your PhD plan, right?
Yeah, to look at materialization versus virtualization. But this is more of a first step. We're just gonna do it dirty and just materialize all of it, and then as we see there are limitations materializing all of it because it gets really, really big, and then I imagine that query performance is probably not the best when you have something that large. But we still need to look into how HTT indexes may help, And
Well,
what
I
kind of
think-
queries you're gonna be running?
I think it will be fine.
Yeah.
Like 25 gigabytes in, like, what is it, Turtle?
It's N triples.
And triples. Yeah, I think converting that to HDT. Yeah, how small will I get? Maybe a gigabyte or something?
Yeah,
I think it should be quite feasible to query that efficiently. Like how many triples does it contain approximately?
I would have to look. It's in the factor of each line has between 12 and 15 triples that are produced from a single line in the initial VCF file. So it's like a factor of, I think it on average like 42 times the original file size. So it's a lot of triples.
How many? A million, a billion?
Yeah, I think it's in the order of over 1 million. I don't think it's quite 2 billion.
Should be doable to query.
But yeah, and then it's also, if that isn't doable, looking at the vocabulary and seeing if we can refine the vocabulary in a way that makes the triple number decrease.
I guess it also depends on what kind of queries you do. If you do like massive aggregations over a bunch
Yes.
of these triples,
Yeah.
or a bunch of the data that is in the VCF, I think it.
Yeah, and that's where future in my PhD, I'm looking at privacy preserving aggregators for those kind of queries. We shall see.
That would be tough.
Good. I see Brian has a comment or question.
Yes, I have two questions. So the first one, maybe I just missed it, but what is the goal of converting VCS file into RDF?
So the main, that is a great question. The main advantage that I'm leaning into at the moment is being able to link heterogeneous data that is relevant to specific lines of data in a VCF, so like a specific mutation, with other data that could be useful for that individual. So for instance, if there is a known protein that gets misfolded because of a specific mutation, and that knowledge is stored in a public database like UniProt, theoretically, you could be able to link that data to that specific mutation. And then when you query for like, if this patient has any like things that I should be aware of for protein misfolding information, it can look through the file for those kinds of sort of additional information. And that's just one example. There are also things like medical tests that have been done that flag certain mutations as being potentially problematic. Other things like privacy over only specific parts of your genome. So if a query is looking over your genome, it only has access to some of the mutations and not all of them. And sort of denoting that kind of more specific information over the VCF file that's not natively supported by VCF format.
Yeah, and you could even link it to non-medical information, like the place where this person lives at the moment. Like, is it located nearby? Maybe it's some kind of polluting factory or whatever, or where has this person been born, or things like that.
Or more technically speaking, for VCF experts, you could also theoretically link metadata about specific variant calls, which are like the individual lines that are mutations in the file that don't conform with VCF format, but would add additional information about that mutation or how the computer determined that there was a mutation there, which could add more provenance for when these kinds of files are actually used for medical purposes.
Okay, it's really interesting. Thank you.
Mhm.
My second question is, I mean, it's not really a question, is that Mino is working on, or was working with Olaf Hartig on virtualization of RML, basically to have like some document that are in a different format than RDF, and then based on the query that you're performing, it will just materialize a section of the document that you need. And I'm wondering if it's something that might be useful for what you are doing.
Possibly, but then the problem with what data is linked where and how is that formatted is the question. and how is that integrated into a query process. So I'm taking the easy approach of just make it all a graph, and then when we link data, we can just denote it in the graph itself, opposed to a separate graph file that is then integrated into the virtualized view when the query occurs. But that is a possibility.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions, let me find my cursor and go to the next slide. And that's Ruben.
Yeah.
Let's rotate my screen. It broke again. Let me fix that. There we go.
All right. So my high-level goal is still the same. I want to do a client-side optimization, meaning that we use the fact that a single query engine instance in link traversal will serve a single user. So we can sort of use the patterns that a user sort of shows in our optimization approaches. So what I did this month is I made a first draft for a position paper on querying hybrid or hybrid link traversal over heterogeneous sources. So that means that we can also not only query documents in link traversal, but also use, for example, Sparkle endpoint, and possibly if we can determine some exclusive groups, we can also send subqueries to that Sparkle endpoint and integrate it in our query plan. So I have a position paper on the challenges and possible solutions and research directions, which will be submitted to STS at UWC. Then I finished the implementation of my caching approaches that I want to test with the new benchmark. So one cache just caches the unindexed quads, which are then fed to the aggregated store when a new query started. So we just do raw quads caching. Then we also have a cache which indexes these quads into a store in separate stores. And then this is a separate query source in the query, so it's not fed into the aggregate store, so you don't need to ingest them anymore. And the idea is that unindexed quads will be faster when there's a lot of deletes, because it's very easy to add it to the cache, but using it from the cache is a little more expensive. If there's very little evictions or deletes, then we think indexed quads will be faster. And finally, we also have I'm using cardinality estimation over the index quads because I can just do count queries against those stores, and hopefully that will also improve query planning if the cache is a bit up to date. So I start those experiments. For each cache version, I use 3 different sizes depending on the percentage of triples you can cache. So 10, 20, and 40 or 50, I think, the different sizes. And we'll see how that goes. It's going to be a pretty long experiment. So I don't think it's done yet. I haven't looked. And then next month, I want to implement derived resource querying, which is the hybrid querying I talked about. Of those 4 points, I already updated the adaptive query processing to Communica v5. I can now discover derived resource in pods using a sort of specialized triple. And now I'm stuck on 3 and 4, which is determining if they're usable, because I want to make them sort of extensible too, so that it's kind of a generic thing where you just reason over some shape that is defined by an actor that makes a shape from a derived resource, and then integrate it nicely into the plan in a way that doesn't cause data duplication, because these derived resources are alternative views. So if you already did reference a part of a solid pod and all the data you already got from it, then you find the derived resource. You still need to be careful about using it because you can duplicate it. Then
maybe on that point, if you would think that solving that problem, like the duplication problem, is too difficult to solve together with doing the whole stems approach, what we could also temporarily do is just make sure that the data is not duplicated within the pod, so that the derived views, that the views exist, but that the original data does not exist anymore. And then you can temporarily simplify the problem, solve that first, and then once we have time left, or if we have time left, go back to that problem.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I'll just start with assuming that duplication doesn't matter, and then see where the problem lies and then how difficult it is to fix. But I'm not there yet. I still need to use the actual right resource and identify how to determine that. So but I'll fix it when I get there. That's
good.
So submit the position paper, which is due 3rd of March, but it should be very doable. And then when the results come in from the caching benchmark, or the query sequence benchmark, I'll also finish that paper because it's already halfway done. Just need to add the results and some final sections. What's that?
Okay. Cool. Any questions?
Do you already have an idea how you will? I think you said that you don't. But do you already have an idea how to determine like these derived resources and whether they will be usable in the query plan and at what location in the query plan?
Well, my plan was to use the fragment selector shapes to determine what they can answer, and then have some bus that sort of identifies or groups different derived resources based on what they can do, and specifically what that actor wants to do. That actor is then linked to some place in the query plan. And it just reasons over which one is the best to use. For example, for a subquery, you can say, the Sparkle endpoint is worse than a subquery that is already pre-computed, because pre-computed is less server effort. So I'm going to use a pre-computed query, and then I think something like this will be probably the way to go. But yeah, I'm not super sure yet.
Yeah, something I'm wondering now, the derived views that you are considering, are they always a view or a complete view of the original data set? Or is it sometimes a subset? Or what do you
can be a subset. So but there's some line that says what data is considered. So I plan on using that. It's a log pattern, and then adding a filter to the link queue whenever a derived resource is used. So it filters out anything that matches that pattern.
No. Okay. Because the fragment selector shapes, they only allow you to match queries with the expressivity or the types of operators that are supported in the view. So the fragment selector shapes are not good for matching subsets, but only matching query expressivity, essentially. But if you can solve that using the link filters, that should be fine, I think. By the way, this question of subsets in views, is this also something that you discuss in your position paper?
No, it's sort of something I realized when I started working on it 2 days ago.
Yeah, maybe we should also incorporate it in there, because it complicates the problem.
Moving parts. I realized when I started working something. To write down what I want to do.
Because if it's a full view of the complete data set, then the problem is simpler in a sense. But if it's a subset, then you have extra conditions to check.
Yep.
No. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Now you're not even talking about aggregation yet.
Well,
because you could say that you detect this as well, right? That you detect that a view is like an aggregation step, but that you also do like this subquery aggregation within your query, so that that whole thing can be replaced with just that resource, or that resource with an additional filter or whatever.
No.
But I wonder then, because if you have this kind of substitution with your resource, with your query, actually, like if you have this thing where part of your query plan overlaps or like has enough in common with like the resource definition, then you could say I just have this, I just query the resource definition instead. Maybe you still need to alter it in some way, right? Add a filter because it's not restrictive enough or whatever. But then to do that, then you need to know what places in your query plan are interesting to look at to start with, because if you do this in every operation in your tree, the complexity of this thing becomes gigantic.
Yeah, my plan was to only use star queries, star patterns, PGPs as sort of the right views that I can use. Because also because I'm going to use a assumption of authoritativeness that any subject with the same base URL as the pod will only be present in that pod. Otherwise, you can never make exclusive groups. And then it makes a lot of sense to just use star patterns and try to fit those BGPs in. Because yeah, otherwise it's very difficult.
Yeah, so in a sense, we initially assumed that derived views would only cover this, but then we discovered, okay, now it can also sometimes this, like a subset of the original data set, but your comment indicates that no, it can actually also sometimes be this, so that there's more data that is not in the original data set, like that is possibly derived from the original data set. That's what you were saying, right?
If you are drawing something, we cannot see it from the stream.
Yeah, but the drawing is very bad in any case.
You won't see it on the camera. It's a bunch of circles that are subsets and not subsets.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, it depends on what you see as new data. If I have an aggregation, is this new data or is this the same data? Like
in terms of triples, it's new data.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
But yeah, it's derived from. So information-wise, there's no new information.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, food for thought for the paper.
No. I think putting the guardrails here, restricting yourself to what you want to accomplish will be crucial here, because I think the problem itself is really hard. But it's super cool.
Yeah,
I'm totally interested in reading it.
All right. Any other?
Just Brian.
Yes, Brian.
Yes, I have a question. Those derived view, how are they defined basically? Because usually a view is just a query. So do you, in the pod, do you have access to just, a query that tell you that all of this data that is somewhere is projected by this Sparkle query, or is it another way that those derived views are defined?
Yeah, so the derived views can be a query, a construct query. They can be a quad pattern index. I'm not sure what that is exactly. They can be quad pattern fragments, and they can be a shackle. I'm not pretty sure. I plan on using the query and the quad pattern fragments for a solid pod. And so you do have a query defined in a file somewhere that you can use to determine if the query is, so the derived view is usable for your query. And you can also fill in parts of the query using parameters. So those are also defined. So you can give a URL with some parameters, and then it will fill those into the query. So you don't have to pre-compute all queries ever that you might want to use.
Okay, but it's an arbitrary Sparkle query that can be done to create those derived resources.
Yes, but they need to be defined server side. So I'm also planning like part of my paper will also be a general approach of making derived views on the server side that don't require assumptions based on that approach from the client side. So you don't need to link those per se together, but more like a best recommendation.
But it's also not arbitrary queries, right? Because it says like aggregation and stuff will not be included. You will do these pod queries. So it's not arbitrary queries that you will support.
Well, the derived view can support arbitrary queries.
Yeah, but you won't support derived views on arbitrary queries.
No.
Okay.
Okay, and the way that you are selecting those views to be query relevant, what do you do?
Don't know yet. That's the next step, determining where to use what views and how to do that properly in an extensible way.
Okay, but I guess in the context of link traversal, you need to decompose your query into multiple parts, right? When communicating with those derived views.
Maybe, I don't know. I think it depends on think it depends on the query. I'm not too sure yet.
Well,
I need to think about it.
It's the query containment problem.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the same problem as you were tackling, Brian, for your shapes work.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm wondering, because I feel like in link traversal, it's something maybe different because you have an infinite, I mean, you have a unknown amount of sources that you want to collect. That's why I'm wondering if it's really the same as the query containment problem or if it's something different. Because usually view selection, you have like a closed world, and with link traversal, you have an open world. So I'm just not sure. But I know that Ruben apply other restriction, like those things about exclusivity. So I'm just not sure. So I was just kind of wondering.
Yeah, I think exclusivity sort of closes it a little bit, because you can say, this part of the data will only be answered and in completeness by the right view in star shape. So then you can just use that, and then you need to do some clever routing of data query planning to make sure that you don't get duplicates. And I think it should be doable then, because you have an exclusive.
I guess I'm not sure, but it answer my question. Thank you.
All right, let's continue to Jitse.
Yes, so my high-level goal is optimizing write performance in decentralized personal data ecosystems. You will see this on this slide and nowhere else. So yeah, we can go next. What I worked on instead is an ESWC resource introducing Dracula, which is a parser generator and transformer library. And that the resource got accepted, so yippee. Then I also worked, since the last time, which was in December, I worked on Edwin's set-based CRDTs in Communica using RDF 1.2 recursive triples. So these are the triple terms that RDF 1.2 introduces. So that work is done, and we have a working implementation on these CRDTs that are set-based, and we chose to have them set-based because then, it integrates nicely with Communica, which assumes set-based RDF, right? Because RDF is set-based, and so it's within that assumption of our set-based RDF data. It fits nicely. Then I worked on Sparkle view rewriting. So that's basically the idea where you define a virtual view using a set of construct queries or a set of select queries with then their accompanying mapping heads, which is something that I worked on in my research day in Vienna as well, but still need to finalize. And then, so what I did in the previous months was add support for IRI and literal templates. So basically, if you have a variable, right, then you can construct this IRI using a variable that you selected, that you bound using one of your select queries, for example. And then I had a lot of B-node frustrations because Sparkle doesn't support the creation of B-node. So Sparkle doesn't support the creation of B-nodes in like a consistent way across bindings, right? So if you have one solution mapping, it will contain a B-node, but Sparkle doesn't support that you have a solution mapping containing a B-node and then another solution mapping containing that same B-node. So that's kind of frustrating, and I need to make my way around it. And currently, this will be, I will tackle this problem either by by introducing a named function that can support this creation of consistent B-nodes, or assuming that what's it called? So colonization, yes. So where you first, as a pre-processing step, convert your B-nodes into IRIs, and then you don't have the B-node problem anymore. So that's something I worked on. Then I looked into WebMCP for the Communica to query.communica.dev. So WebMCP is this idea of having the model context protocol for LLMs, which allows you to say, oh, there's a function that this LLM can invoke, and then how to invoke that function and bring that into the browser. So having this into the on the query website of Communica supports that you open this website in your browser and then chat with the LLM saying, hey, please query Wikidata using or Wikidata and some other resource using the Communica engine provided in your browser. So that's nice. And then, yeah, along that, I looked into agentic coding and local AI, Olama, and Open Web UI. And if there's people watching and they have some good opinions on this that they would like to share, like constructive, being use this is something like resources that are really nice to read, for example, please do.
What is Open Web UI? I don't know that one.
Open Web UI is basically that you have like this, the website that ChatGPT provides for you, that you basically have that Web UI as well, but then not with ChatGPT on the backend, but with another LLM provider on the backend. And for us,
So
I set it up using the
generic
Olama
chatbot interface.
Yeah, but it's exactly the same as ChatGPT, and then you can say which model you want to query, use, and stuff like that. Exactly the same. It's very similar to what you're used to for chatting with an LLM. Okay, so that's that. Next targets are writing a poster about these adwins set-based CRDTs within Communica that we support within Communica. It's on a separate branch for now, but for ICWE in 2026, then also writing a demo on Dracula and Communica's combined modularity, showcasing the power of that. And I've written part of this paper, and currently it will be along the lines of Communica wanted to tackle some problems using modularity, but then we came across the problem where the parser, Sparkle parser and transformer steps, etc., still were like a big monolith within the modular Communica framework, and then that we created Dracula to solve that, and then how showcase what kind of things that allows for. So this is in the making, and then also finishing up the Sparkle view rewriting, specifically with the blank notes, and then needing to do benchmarks and stuff so that we can write a paper, I think, having a deadline in April or something. And that's it.
When is the ICWE deadline?
The 13th of March. So I have a deadline on the 3rd and on the 13th. And then another one on the 13th for the Dracula camera ready. So I'm busy 2 weeks.
Lots of deadlines in March.
Yeah. Yeah. Good thing that I'm also planning my holidays in May. Yay. Good month. Wow.
European summer holiday.
All in May. It's crazy. So yeah, that's that for me.
Okay. Any questions for Jitse? Okay. If not, let's continue. I'll try to share or to rotate my screen again. Let's hope it doesn't break. Still there. Bryan is next, of course. It's not my turn yet. Bryan, over to you.
Yes, so my high-level goal is to optimize decentralized query by using the artifact from data provider and also the structure that they enforce when they publish their data. So we can go to the next slide. So last month, I've worked on 3 things. So the first one is about query containment. So I work on a paper about that. So I created a better scope for the paper, I have a better vision, a better narrative, how it's going to be. I've also worked on formalizing my approach for federated queries. So federated queries using SPARQL 1.1, so the service clauses, and federated queries for automatic source selection. So it's not fully done, but it's in the working. I've also worked on formalizing my bag and backset semantic approach. So it's mainly translating previous results in the literature for SPARQL using the approach that the engine spec CS have created. So the other thing that I've done is I resubmitted my, or at least I'm going to resubmit my demo on online schema alignment that I've tried to submit for the web conference, but sadly it got rejected. So I've reworked it and I'm going to submit it to ISWC. So a big part of it was to cut because the number of pages is less than half. And I also did this small, I mean, not really a benchmark, like what Maarten said, so a bit of an indication of the performance. I've also started to rework on my work on federated queries using shapes. So I've done the first draft of an NLNet proposal to be able to have a bit of funding about this work. And I've also worked on coding a module to convert shape into a knowledge graph. Can go to the next slide. So my next target is to continue and to finish the implementation of the FedUp algorithm. So it's related to the work on optimizing federated queries using shape. And I also want to finish my NLNet proposal. So those are the target of the next month. And that's it for me.
Any questions for Brian? So what are the main challenges you foresee in the FedUp implementation?
Yeah, it would be, there are two main challenges, or maybe three. One of them is the filter expression, because I want to support that, because one of my arguments is that, yeah, we are not using a custom summary, we are using shape, which and shape are standard. So this is one of the arguments. The second argument is that shape are more expressive, that we can get more performance out of it. And part of the argument is that we can now exploit filter expression. So I want to be able to implement that, and it's going to take a bit of work to do it. Another challenge will be with the benchmark, because I realized that a lot of queries in the benchmark are actually quite simple. They are not using a lot of filter expression and things like that. Whereas my approach I think will tend to optimize more queries that are a little bit more complicated. So with filter expression or with patterns that are a bit more complex than what is presented into those benchmarks. And the third challenge, which is something that I haven't started, is that I want to show more theoretically how, yeah, what class of query where this approach is better, and why is it kind of strictly more expressive than the custom summary. But I'm not fully sure how I'm going to tackle it, so I think that's maybe a challenge, or maybe it's going to be easy, but it is left to be seen.
So following what you said for the second point, the expressivity of the queries, are you going to use the same benchmark? So what was it, FetShop? Or
Yeah,
are
they
you
are
also going to use other ones or extend it?
They are using two benchmarks. There's the FetShop, and there is also large RDF bench, I think. So yeah, I'm planning to using the same benchmark, but I might modify or add new queries. For instance, there is some strange, at least what I consider to be strange, but I know the reason for it. But in the FetShop, they are always using distinct for every query. The reason was that for some query engine, apparently, if you're not using distinct, you have strange behavior. But I feel like it's kind of restrictive. And so I might, yeah, one of the things that I might take that off and see how it is. But I think I will mainly just have, if you take previous queries and just add a bit of complexity to them, I think. But I need to think about it, and I haven't really done that.
No, what you could also do is see if there are any other non-federated Sparkle benchmarks that exist that do contain the queries that you optimize more for, and try to convert those to a federated benchmark, similar to how FetShop is based on the Berlin Sparkle benchmark.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. That could also be a nice approach.
Because then your work would be a bit stronger. Then you could say, I build upon this existing work instead of inventing your own queries.
Because I wasn't planning to really, I guess it's inventing them, but it's more like there is this query that already exists. Let's add a filter expression, or let's add a union towards that. That was more of my approach. But yeah, taking in existing benchmark could also be a nice way. But I also need to look at the result. Maybe there are some queries where I can already make a point that my approach optimizes more for this type of queries. So yeah, it's a bit left. It's left to be seen.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Any other final questions? No. Okay. Then we can continue to me. So my goal is still the same, supporting everyone here in their research. What I did in the last month, a lot of small and last minute stuff that popped up. So first thing, I attended a cost action of Goblin, which was quite interesting. So Goblin is a cost action about open knowledge graphs, essentially. Then I worked a bit on adding indexes in the RDF stores, which Communica uses for in-memory indexing to optimize property paths, and more specifically the nodes function within certain property path expressions. That's almost done, but yeah, I haven't been able to work on it for the last couple of weeks. So it's on hold a little bit. Then I submitted workshop proposals, one for semantics and one for ISWC. The one for ISWC was accepted a couple of days ago already. For the one at semantics, we're still waiting. So for ISWC, we will have a DMKG workshop, which is about data management for knowledge graphs. So all of our querying work also fits in there very nicely. Then I submitted a paper on the question of whether or not AI crawlers killed Sparkle Federation to a workshop at ESWC. Then I also did a small experiment to see if we can expose Communica as an MCP server. It looks like we can do that, and it's quite easy to do. So that's also available now on NPM. And I also wrote a small demo paper about it for ESWC. And for my next targets, the next month is a bit full, a lot of teaching going on. Then there's also the SWOT for HCLS workshop, conference that Elias and I are going to attend. Then if I have time left, I still want to continue with extending Solid Bench with Sparkle endpoints. My hope was that this could be part of this position paper, but it's probably not going to happen. Then there's also some more work to do for the RDF and Sparkle working group. And yeah, I don't know why I keep adding this last thing. I never get to it, but yeah, who knows? Maybe this month. Probably not. And that's all for me. Any final comments or questions? No. Okay. Yes.
Can we know the result of this AI crawler skills Sparkle endpoints?
Well, it's more of a position paper, so there's no real answer yet, but it,
Points I tested, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
So there are, in the paper there are some small manual experiments over Uniprot, but also DBpedia and Wikidata. And yeah, those are probably the most popular public Sparkle endpoints, and over those you cannot federate anymore. So that's quite problematic. If you cannot federate
You
over.
can naively federate. If you impose very, very stringent rate limits and very, very simple queries, you can get it to work. But in real life scenarios, when you have pretty specific queries
No.
and you don't take rate limiting into account.
Yeah, so the conclusion is essentially of that paper, well, there are many conclusions, but one of the conclusions is that endpoints need a clear way to announce the restrictions that they impose, so that we can build federation algorithms that actually take into account those restrictions and plan around it. And then we could solve the problem, but
So it's
yeah.
a bit like the federation paper, real world federation paper.
yeah,
Yeah,
that-
it's
yeah.
more just like calling attention to the problem, and then I'm gonna address specifically what we found
yeah,
in this space and specific suggestions that we have to improve it.
indeed. All right. Then we're done for today. So the next update is on the last day of March, so March 30th. Then we'll have our next progress update at 9:30 again. And hopefully we can sit at our normal room
In
again.
our normal building.
Yeah. All right. That's all. See you, Brian. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I cannot see you.
Relating to nothing.